A little bit poor timing. When did Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Shalala put this out? Now, look, I want to just, I feel like, you know, we need one of these disclaimers before we ever talk about Venezuela. I am not, I have watched the videos purporting to show that there's no problems whatsoever in Venezuela. I have dug into the claims of how many, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who have left because of things there. I've read on both sides of this issue. I don't claim to know the reality, the lived reality of 25% of Venezuelans or 51% of Venezuelans or 75% of Venezuelans or Venezuelans who live above a certain income level or below a certain income level. None of that is relevant in terms of the question as to whether we should be intervening, certainly not militarily, but in any fashion beyond the most, I think, you know, soft diplomacy. So when we're doing things like embargoes and shutting off ability to get funds, we're just punishing the Venezuelan people to the extent that there's any efficacy. It is doing stuff like that is predicated on the suffering of the people there, so that they depose their leadership. Now, with that said, we do know the reality of the story that we were told from U.S. officials, from the vice president on down, about the humanitarian aid that was brought to Venezuela on a bridge. But before we get to that reality, let's go to this reality with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Shalala, who find themselves, I guess, on one end of that bridge. Is this the same bridge? Trying to make an argument. Well, let's listen.
The humanitarian aid is just a little ways away. Maduro could let it in and save his people, but of course he will not. The container that he put on this bridge to block it says peace. There is no peace here. There are only, on the other side of this bridge, hungry people, starving children, children who are dying. We have medicines. The community, the Latin American community, Colombia, 50 different countries have contributed to make sure we can save the Venezuelan people. Maduro must go.
We came here today to support the people of Venezuela and to thank the people of Colombia. And together we say, Viva Venezuela.
Viva Venezuela.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm glad folks are so concerned about Venezuela in the U.S. Congress. It's nice. I remember them being long time concerned about Venezuela. Here is how that aid got destroyed. Now we know it was not a function of Maduro's people putting the aid, you know, burning the aid. It was, it turns out, according to a New York Times sourced video, a protester who was protesting alongside the aid trucks, throwing Molotov cocktails at the Maduro police forces, and accidentally lighting one of the trucks on fire. Here, show it again. You can see there's the Molotov cocktail, throwing it, and the second one, the rag leaves the Molotov cocktail, lands on the truck. I mean, I'm just shocked to hear that there was Molotov cocktails. My understanding is that, like, you know, Molotov cocktails, like, I remember when those Palestinians had the kites that they would let up that were on fire.
Yeah, I mean,
and how horrific that was,
right.
And called for snipers to be shooting at the kite flyers.
I also just love that they specifically mentioned the role of Colombia, which, like, of course, they play a role, but, like, the Colombian government very much would give the Venezuelan government a run for its money and exceed it in many ways in terms of what they do in areas where there's an insurgency. And this government came into power canceling a peace deal with the FARC under the umbrella of a former president, Alvaro Uribe, where there's at least some WikiLeaks cables indicated that he had like relationships with Pablo Escobar going back to the 80s. So that's who like this
Can't help who your high
Democratic
school
coup
friends are.
caucus. Well, he
Right.
is a small businessman who built an enterprise committed to the types of values that Howard Schultz is trying to put across.
I mean, it's just the hypocrisy is astounding. But if people want to go down there and say that you should let in humanitarian aid, that's all well and good. But the United States has a horrible record of intervening. Like it is very difficult to come up with an example of when this worked out well.
Well, they're politicized. I mean, I mentioned this last week, but I want to keep hitting the CIA program in Pakistan with fake vaccines, where they used to collect DNA
Right.
for the Bin Laden operation. This and somebody pointed out to me, not only was that an important point to make, but that I talked about consequences, theoretical consequences. There were real ones. Doctors were killed.
Oh yeah, no,
as
we
a
heard about
result
this,
of
and
that
people
one.
stopped taking vaccinations.
And people
Oh,
stop
yeah, that's been
taking
going on.
as
That was going
broad
on
to
for-
Nigeria.
Yeah.
So what you're doing with this is you're actually handing if you oppose the Maduro government, you're handing them a correct political talking point, and you're undermining every single organization that might legitimately be trying to get ease the situation there.
Right.
Well, and here's the secret, is that it did work out well for some people, right? It worked
Of
out
course.
well for the oil companies and the ruling class of those countries and the U.S. government in its attempts to impose a certain economic program on the world.
Well, I would say a narrow slice of the U.S. government in many respects, but yes, of course, there were even winners in Iraq. It's just not the Iraqi people.
Well, I think Ken Silverstein pointed out in his report from there, which is interesting, that it doesn't seem one of the kind of funny dynamics of this for like the coup mongers in the United States and then also the Maduro government is like the oil flow and that relationship is working. So the oil companies aren't necessarily that excited one way or another about this because they're getting their revenue and that trade is happening regardless.
Either way.
Sure, they don't, it's not like they care or oppose it, but they're not like gunning for it because it doesn't really implicate their revenue right now.